This might be the most confusing headline you'll read all year. For decades, Wetherspoons has been the backbone of British high streets, a place where pensioners could enjoy a proper breakfast for less than a fiver, where mates could meet for a pint without breaking the bank, and where families could have a decent Sunday roast without remortgaging the house. So what really happened to Britain's most beloved budget pub chain, and why does a night at Spoons now cost as much as a meal at your local gastropub? I just want to know when, as a nation, we reached this point. When did a Wetherspoons breakfast become the same price as a Harvester? We can't pop down the pub anymore without spending £30 a head, and that's before you've even had a proper session. In 1958, a bloke named William Brake had a brilliant idea. Back then, pubs and restaurants got their supplies from all over the shop. Your butcher brought the meat, your baker brought the rolls, and your local dairy dropped off the milk. It was chaos really, but it's how things were done. Then Brake realised something important. If you brought all these suppliers under one roof, you could control the entire market. So he started Brake Brothers, which eventually became the Brakes Group we know today. By the 1990s, Brakes had swallowed up every regional food distributor worth having, leaving Britain with essentially three major players: Brakes, Bidvest, and Booker. And here's where it gets interesting. When you control the supply to every pub and restaurant in Britain, you get to set the rules. If we look at what happened during the pandemic, Brakes saw their revenue drop by 40% in 2020 because nobody was eating out. Fair enough. But then in 2022, something odd happened. Their profits jumped by 127%, even though people still weren't dining out like they used to. The reason? They quietly shifted their pricing strategy, passing on inflation costs directly to establishments like Wetherspoons, who had nowhere else to turn. Remember when Wetherspoons had genuinely cheap pints? A proper £1.99 pint of Ruddles or a £2.50 Doombar? Those days are long gone, and the reason sits with Britain's beer oligopoly. In 2020, Carlsberg and Marston's merged their brewing operations, creating a behemoth that now controls over 60% of Britain's car-scale market. This wasn't just any merger, it was a calculated move to dominate the exact market that Wetherspoons relies on. Before this merger, Spoons could play breweries off against each other, negotiating rock-bottom prices because they were shifting such massive volume. But now, Carlsberg Marston's effectively sets the price, and Wetherspoons has to pay it or stop serving car-scale altogether. The merger also meant fewer beer festivals, less variety, and higher wholesale prices across the board. What's worse is that Heineken owns most of the rest, including John Smith's and Kronenbourg. So you've got two massive corporations controlling the taps, and publicans like Tim Martin have lost all their bargaining power. That £2 pint your dad remembers? It's now £3.80, and it's not coming back down. Here's something most people don't realise about British pubs. For over a century, the tie system actually kept prices competitive. Under this system, landlords agreed to buy their beer exclusively from one brewery in exchange for lower rent and startup costs. It sounds dodgy, but it worked because breweries had to compete for these tied houses, which kept wholesale beer prices relatively low. The system had its problems, sure, but it created a marketplace. Then in 2021, the government essentially killed off the traditional tie with new regulations, and you'd think this would be brilliant news for pub chains like Wetherspoons. Except it wasn't. Without the tie system, the big breweries no longer had to compete as aggressively. They could simply raise prices across the board because pubs had nowhere else to go. The free market sounds lovely in theory, but when you've only got 2 or 3 massive suppliers, it's not really free anymore, is it? Wetherspoons used to leverage its size to negotiate deals similar to tied houses, but now even they're at the mercy of Carlsberg Marston's and Heineken's pricing structures. We all remember the energy crisis of 2022 and 2023, but what most people don't realise is how catastrophically it hit businesses like Wetherspoons. Residential energy bills doubled or tripled, which was bad enough. But commercial energy contracts, they increased by 400% to 600% in some cases. A typical Wetherspoons pub went from paying around £50,000 a year in energy costs to over £250,000 practically overnight. Now, you might think a massive chain could absorb that, but here's the problem. Wetherspoons operates on wafer-thin margins of around 7 to 8% profit. When your energy bill jumps by £200,000, you'd need to sell an additional 50,000 meals just to break even, and that's assuming you don't raise prices. But they did raise prices because they had no choice. That full English breakfast that was £3.99 in 2019, it's now £6.79, and people remember. The older generation especially, they remember when Spoons was genuinely cheap, and now they're looking at the menu thinking, I could cook this myself for half the price. And they're right. Business rates in Britain are absolutely mental, and they're killing high street pubs faster than anything else. Wetherspoons owns most of its properties outright, which sounds like a smart move until you realise that means they're paying full commercial rates on every single building. A typical Spoons pays between £80,000 and £150,000 per year in business rates alone, depending on location. That's before they've sold a single pint or breakfast. The problem got worse in 2023 when the government ended the business rates relief that had been in place during COVID. Suddenly, Wetherspoons was hit with enormous tax bills while still trying to recover from the pandemic. Compare this to McDonald's or KFC, who often lease smaller premises and pay proportionally less in rates. A Spoons in a town centre might be paying triple what a McDonald's down the road pays, even though they're serving similar numbers of customers. The government keeps promising to reform business rates, but they never do, and it's crushing the traditional British pub model that Wetherspoons represents. Here's something that's fundamentally changed since Brexit. Wetherspoons can't staff their pubs properly anymore. Before 2016, roughly 25% of Wetherspoons staff came from EU countries, particularly Poland, Romania, and Bulgaria. These were reliable workers who'd stay for years, learn the systems, and help train new staff. Then Brexit happened, and that pipeline dried up completely. Now Spoons is competing with Amazon warehouses, supermarkets, and delivery services for the same pool of British workers, and they're losing. Why would someone work a Friday night shift at Wetherspoons for £11.50 an hour when they could stack shelves at Tesco for £12 with no drunk customers? The result is chronic understaffing, which means slower service, which means customers get frustrated and leave, which means less revenue, which means they can't afford to pay more staff. It's a vicious cycle. And when you do hire someone, they're often inexperienced because the jobs become so unappealing that only desperate people apply. Your pint takes 15 minutes to arrive, your food's cold, and you think, why am I bothering? That's the staff shortage crisis in action. If you're enjoying this deep dive into what's really happened to Wetherspoons, do us a favour and hit that like button. Drop a comment with your favourite Spoons memory and subscribe so you don't miss our next video. Right, let's carry on. Remember when each Wetherspoons felt slightly different? The one in your town had its own character, maybe a slightly different menu, local ales on tap that reflected the area? Those days are gone. In the pursuit of efficiency and cost-cutting, Wetherspoons has standardised everything to within an inch of its life. Every pub now gets the same frozen food deliveries from breaks, the same microwavable curries, the same pre-portioned steaks. This standardisation was meant to save money, but it's backfired spectacularly. See, when everything tastes the same and you're charging nearly the same prices as a proper pub down the road, why would anyone choose Spoons? The magic of Wetherspoons was that it was cheap and decent. Take away the cheap part, and you're left with microwaved food in a building that hasn't been properly refurbished since 2003. The older generation especially notices this because they remember when pub food meant something. Now they're getting a curry that's been made in a factory in Northampton, frozen, shipped to a warehouse, then reheated in a microwave by a teenager who started working there last week. It's not good enough, and people are voting with their feet. Wetherspoons pushed their app ordering system as the future of pub going, and in some ways it made sense. Fewer staff needed, faster service, lower costs. But for their core demographic, people in their 50s, 60s and 70s, it's been an absolute disaster. These are people who came to the pub for a chat, for human interaction, for the ritual of going to the bar and having a word with the barman. Now they're expected to download an app, create an account, link a payment method, and order through their phone. My own dad tried it once, got frustrated, and now refuses to go to Spoons at all. And he's not alone. Thousands of older customers have simply stopped going because the experience has become alienating and impersonal. The app was meant to save money, but it's actually costing Wetherspoons their most loyal customers, the ones who used to come in 3 or 4 times a week for breakfast or lunch. You can't put a price on that kind of regular custom, but Spoons is finding out the hard way what happens when you lose it. The traditional British Sunday roast was Wetherspoons' secret weapon. For under a tenner, you could get a proper roast with all the trimmings: Yorkshire pudding, roast potatoes, vegetables, gravy, the lot. It wasn't amazing, but it was decent value, and it brought families in every Sunday. But something's changed in the last 2 years, and the quality has absolutely plummeted while the price has shot up. What used to cost £7.99 is now £11.49, and the portions are smaller. Worse still, everything's clearly been reheated or assembled from frozen components. The Yorkshire puddings are like cardboard, the roast potatoes taste like they've been cooked 3 days ago, and the meat is often tough as old boots. This matters because Sunday roasts are emotional for British people. It's about tradition, about family, about doing something properly. When Spoons serves up a substandard roast for nearly £12, people feel betrayed. They're comparing it to their memories of proper roasts, and Wetherspoons is losing that comparison badly. Many have gone back to cooking at home or spending a bit extra at a proper pub, and Spoons is losing the Sunday crowd that used to be guaranteed income. Wetherspoons built its reputation on cheap breakfasts. The full English for under £4 was legendary. Pensioners would meet their mates, get breakfast, and a coffee for £5 and have a proper catch-up. It was a social institution, as much as it was a meal. But now that same breakfast costs between £6.79 and £7.99 depending on location, and the value proposition has completely evaporated. Here's why this matters so much. Breakfast customers are the most price sensitive because they're often retired people on fixed incomes. A 75% price increase over 5 years is devastating for that demographic. They're not stupid. They can buy a pack of sausages, some bacon, eggs and beans from Aldi for £5 and make breakfast for themselves 3 or 4 times. The Wetherspoons breakfast is no longer a bargain. It's actually expensive when you break it down. And because breakfast customers were often the most regular, coming in 2, 3, 4 times a week, losing them has gutted Wetherspoons' weekday daytime trade. Those empty tables you see at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday? They used to be filled with pensioners having breakfast, not anymore. Something broader has happened to British society that's hurting Wetherspoons more than any pricing or supply issue. We've fallen out of love with pub culture. The generation that's now in their 60s and 70s grew up with pubs as the centre of social life. You'd meet your mates at the pub, watch football at the pub, celebrate at the pub, commiserate at the pub. But younger people don't do that anymore, and even older people are doing it less. Part of this is cost, certainly, but part of it is cultural shift. We're more isolated, more digital, more home-focused. Why spend £30 at Spoons when you can get a nice bottle of wine from Tesco for £8 and watch Netflix? Why deal with sticky carpets and rowdy teenagers when you can have friends over to your own house? The pub used to be the only place to socialise outside the home, but now it's optional, and when it's optional, people are choosing not to bother. Wetherspoons is suffering because they represent traditional pub culture, and that culture is dying. It's not their fault entirely, but they're paying the price for a broader social change they can't control. Curry Club used to be a British institution. Every Thursday, Wetherspoons would do a curry and a drink for £5.99 or £6.99. It was packed every single week with office workers, retired couples, students, everyone. The curry wasn't authentic, but it was hot, filling, and ridiculously cheap. Then they started messing with it. First they raised the price to £7.99, then £8.99. Then they started excluding premium drinks, then they reduced the portion sizes. Now in 2025, Curry Club barely exist in any meaningful form. It's £10.49 in most locations, and the curries are noticeably smaller than they used to be. What's worse, they taste like they've been sitting in a hot cabinet for 3 hours, because they probably have. The magic of Curry Club was the value and the social aspect. You knew you'd see the same faces every Thursday, you'd have a chat, make it a routine. But when you price people out and reduce quality, they stop coming. Those Thursday evenings that used to have every table full, now they're half empty. Wetherspoons killed one of their best promotional tools through pure greed, and they're paying for it now. Most people don't realise this, but successive British governments have been systematically increasing alcohol duty every single year, and it's absolutely hammering pubs. The alcohol duty escalator means that even if breweries don't raise their prices, Wetherspoons still has to pay more tax on every pint sold. A pint of beer now has roughly 54p of duty built into it, compared to 33p 10 years ago. This hits Wetherspoons particularly hard because they're a volume business. They sell millions of pints a year, and that tax adds up to tens of millions in additional costs. They can't absorb it, so they pass it on to customers, which makes their prices less competitive. And here's the kicker. Supermarkets pay lower duty rates than pubs do, which is why you can buy a 4-pack of Stella for £4.50 at Tesco, but a single pint at Spoons costs £4.20. The tax system is literally designed to favour off-trade over on-trade, which makes no sense if the government claims to support British pub culture. Wetherspoons is caught in a trap. They have to raise prices to cover the duty, but raising prices drives customers away, which means less volume, which means less ability to negotiate with suppliers. It's a death spiral. One of the things that made Wetherspoons special was that they took over beautiful historic buildings, old banks, post offices, theatres, and turned them into pubs. Each one had character, local history, interesting architecture. The Wetherspoons in your town felt different from the one in the next town over, but that identity has been systematically erased through standardisation. Now every Spoons looks basically the same inside regardless of the building. Same carpets, same furniture, same signage, same menu boards. They've lost what made them special. Compare that to traditional pubs, which still maintain local identity, different decor, local photos on the walls, connections to the community. Wetherspoons used to understand this, but somewhere along the way, they decided efficiency was more important than character. For older customers who remember when their local Spoons first opened and felt special, this decline in personality is genuinely sad. It's become just another chain, and chains without competitive pricing are just empty buildings. So there you have it. The real reason Wetherspoons is dying, and it's not just one thing. It's suppliers, energy, tax, reputation, and a changing Britain that doesn't value pub culture the way it used to. If you found this video helpful, make sure you subscribe and click that notification bell. And check out our next video on the screen where we dive into what's really happening to Britain's high streets. I'll see you there.